Hello there. How do you feel about gun control? In my opinion, it's just an awful, misguided idea, and seems unlikely to be enacted in the US, but inevitable in Canada. Canada bans more types of firearms and proposes donating guns to Ukraine. Yeah, I don't understand what's with this nonsense that tying everything to Ukraine sort of makes everything kosher. In my opinion, it makes zero sense. All you needed to do in order to prevent the conflict in Ukraine from even starting was assure Russia you're not going to put NATO missiles on the border, and things would have been fine. That was what they were promised at first until Boris Johnson came in and nixed the agreement that Ukraine was almost signing with Russia. We know this, we have multiple sources on it, I've made videos about it. So, enough about Ukraine right now. Gun control. Canada said Thursday it is outlawing another 324 firearm varieties. Guns, the public safety minister said, belong on the battlefield, not in the hands of hunters or sport shooters. Interesting. So the government should have these guns to use against anyone they deem fit, but you shouldn't be able to protect yourself or your family with those guns, because they belong on the battlefield. Okay. Ottawa also said it is working with the government of Ukraine to see how the guns can be donated to support the fight against Russia. The move follows the 2020 May ban of 1,500 makes and models of firearms, a number that grew to more than 2,000 by November of this year as new variants were identified. In short, they are quickly moving to ban any and all firearms in the country. They're saying that the latest restriction was following expressions of concern from gun control advocates that many assault-style firearms were still not included in 2020 ban. What they mean is semi-automatic, let's be honest. In fact, what they wanted that you are completely unarmed, but for a start, it would do if you had nothing but, a single, when you have to reload after every shot, basically. Semi-automatic just means that you pull the trigger once and one bullet is fired. That's it. Defense Minister Vilbert said Canada approached Ukrainian authorities who expressed interest in some of the guns. Every bit of assistance we can offer to the Ukrainians is one step toward their victory. The federal government, who is working with provinces, territories, and police on a planned buyback of prohibited weapons from individual owners. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna work, and you'll see in a moment why. Mass shootings are relatively rare in Canada, but the newly announced measures come on the eve of the 35th anniversary of the École Polytechnique in Montreal shooting, where a gunman ended 14 women before ending himself. So they go back, 35 years ago, there was a mass shooting here, therefore disarm. Okay. Natalie Probst, a survivor who was wounded in the attack, said Thursday she was targeted for being a woman studying engineering. These are just ending weapons, war weapons, military weapons, so I'm proud we're doing something. Yeah, and then you'll see the consequences of your actions a couple of years down the line, and maybe you'll be less proud. So this is a Fox News article from 2018. Venezuelans regret gun ban, a declaration of war against an unarmed population. So that was 6 years after the gun ban in Venezuela. As Venezuela continues to crumble under the socialist dictatorship of President Nicolás Maduro, some are expressing words of warning and resentment against a 6-year-old gun control bill that stripped citizens of their weapons. Guns would have served as a vital pillar to remaining a free people, or at least able to put up a fight. Javier Venegas, 28, a Venezuelan teacher of English now exiled in Ecuador, told Fox News. The government security forces at the beginning of this debacle knew they had no real opposition to their force. Once things were this bad, it was a clear declaration of war against an unarmed population. Do you trust Justin Trudeau? Do you feel as though the Western world right now is on a good track? There are no threats to your civil liberties, freedom of speech maybe. There have been no incidents where the government forced you to, let's say, stay barricaded in your house and not leave, or try to force you to take certain medications that were experimental. And, the creators of said medications are not held accountable for anything that might happen to you if you take it, but the government still forces you to take it. Did anything of that sort happen to you lately? Do you feel as though Justin Trudeau is treating everyone equally and equitably? That he, let's say, feels that the citizens are just as valid as, newcomers who came in illegally? Did he say anything about Canada not having a culture or belonging more to people that are, foreigners that just came in illegally than to people who lived there for generations? Because I think he might have. If you don't feel that you are fully trusting of Justin Trudeau, his government, or Western democracies in general at the moment, I don't think you're alone. And somehow I think this gun control thing, confiscation thing, is very bad news for those of us who feel that way. Under the direction of then-President Hugo Chavez, the Venezuelan National Assembly in 2012 enacted the Control of Arms, Munitions, and Disarmament Law, with the explicit aim to disarm all citizens. The law took effect in 2013 with only minimal pushback from some pro-democracy opposition figures, banned the legal commercial sale of guns and munitions to all except government entities. Chavez initially ran a months-long amnesty program encouraging Venezuelans to trade their arms for electrical goods. That year, there were only 37 recorded voluntary gun surrenders, while the majority of seizures, more than 12,500, were by force. Because people don't want to give up their guns, government just wants you disarmed so it can do whatever the hell it wants to you. In 2014, with Nicolas Maduro at the helm following Chavez's death, but carrying through his socialist Chavista policies, what was that? The government invested more than $47 million enforcing the gun ban, which has since included grandiose displays of public weapons demolitions in the town square. A former gun store owner inside Venezuela, who told Fox News he has now been relegated to only selling fishing supplies since the ban, said he can't sell any type of weaponry, even a slingshot, and underscored that even BB ammunition and airsoft guns are only issued to police and military officers. The punishment for illicit carrying or selling a weapon is 20 years behind bars. Prior to the 2012 reform, there were only around 8 gun stores in the entire country, and the process of obtaining a legal permit to own and carry was plagued by long wait lines, high costs, and bribery to make the process swifter, as the one department allowed to issue licenses which operated under the umbrella of the Ministry of Defense. Venezuelans didn't care enough about it. The idea of having the means to protect your home was seen as only needed out in the fields. People never would have believed they needed to defend themselves against the government. Venegas explained, Venezuelans evolved to always hope that our government would be non-tyrannical, non-violator of human rights, and would always have a good enough control of criminality. Criminality has been soaring in the West due to unchecked migration, allowing basically anyone to come in, regardless of whether they have a criminal past or not, and also because you have a lot of military-aged young men who are the most likely to use violence for or against the population in defense or in violation of your human rights. And also they are completely unmoored from their social setting, so they don't have the more calming influence of families and communities. So they also don't really have much of a future. They don't know the language often. They are not really going to be afforded a job or educations or, anything really. What they do get is some government money, depending on which Western society. In Britain, for example, they get hotels, but they can still be seen just lounging in the streets. It's not as though they actually have anything to do. They're just provided for. And obviously, how do they say it? Idle hands are the devil's playthings? Something like that. Regardless of the reason, I honestly don't think it's a good idea to allow the government to have complete authority over you. And while Joe Biden said that the government has F-16s and nuclear bombs, and therefore guns won't help against government tyranny, I highly doubt anyone's going to bomb their own population, their own cities. More likely, they're going to send in people with guns to arrest and punish anyone who doesn't play ball. At which point, an armed population can resist. Obviously, you can send enough people, but can you really send enough people to the entire country? And how many of your own military officers are going to be willing to go into a firefight with their own population just to enact tyranny? More likely, the army will turn against you or just stay out of the way as the people bring your government down. There's a reason that pretty much every tyrannical regime in history disarmed the population first, not just Venezuela. It also happened in Germany in the 30s. They had everybody register their weapons, and they didn't allow Jews or other undesirables to carry weapons. You had to basically be a supporter of the regime in order to be allowed to keep your weapons. Same thing happened with the USSR, and it's basically a matter of course. For enacting tyranny, first you gotta disarm the population. Venezuela shows the deadly peril when citizens are deprived of the means of resisting the depredations of a criminal government, said David Koppel, a policy analyst and research director at the Independence Institute and adjunct professor of advanced constitutional law at Denver University. The Venezuelan rulers, like their Cuban masters, apparently viewed citizen possession of arms as a potential danger to a permanent communist monopoly of power. Although the bill was sold to the population as a hardline effort to improve security and sharply reduce crime, many now point to Venezuela as a case study for how gun prohibition can actually produce the opposite effect. The violent crime rate, already high, soared. Almost 28,000 people were ended in 2015, with the homicide rate becoming the world's highest. Compare that, according to gunpolicy.org, an international firearms prevention and policy research initiative, to just under 10,000 in 2012 and 6,500 in 2001, the year before Chavez came into power. So in short, in 3 years it almost tripled after the gun ban, the amount of people being ended violently in Venezuela. Interesting. The total number of gun deaths in 2013 was estimated to 14,622, having steadily risen from 10,913 in 2002. While comprehensive data now goes unrecorded by the government, in September this year, Amnesty International declared Venezuela had an ending rate worse than some war zones, 89 people per 100,000 people, and 3 times that of its volatile neighbor Brazil. Much of the crime has been attributed by analysts to government-backed gangs, referred to in Spanish as colectivos, who were deliberately put in place by the government. They were set up by the government to act as proxies and exert community control. They are the guys on the motorcycles in the poor neighborhoods who ended any protesters, said Vanessa Newman, the Venezuela-American president and founder of Asymmetrica, a Washington, D.C.-based political risk research and consulting firm. The gun reform policy of the government was about social control. As the citizenry got more desperate and hungry and angry with the political situation, they did not want them to be able to defend themselves. It was not about security, it was about a monopoly on violence and social control. So while Venezuelan citizens were stripped of their legal resources to bear arms, the colectivos established by Chavez when he came to power were legally locked and loaded. Deemed crucial to the survival of the socialist dictatorship, the colectivos functioned to brutally subjugate opposition groups, while saving some face as they aren't officially government forces, critics contend. And so on and so on. I think you get the drift. It's an awful idea to allow the government to have a monopoly on force because the government is not trustworthy. That's why we are trying to divide government power between different branches of government, the idea of checks and balances, because we never conceive the government to be infallible or ultimately moral. We try to prevent the government overreach and corruption that are almost inevitable from causing too much harm, and try to afford the population the means to rectify the situation if things get too bad. Right now, what we have is government corruption trying to take away your ability to defend yourself and enforce change on the government if it goes too far. Honestly, there's not much to add. I think I don't know if it's going to be 6 years or 3 or 16, but I think Canadians are going to be very much rowing the day that they allowed the government to take away their firearms. I don't understand how people can keep voting for Trudeau. I think he's an awful politician. I think he doesn't even have the ability to pretend to be authentic. The guy is so plastic, it's insane. And in my opinion, I would feel humiliated to say that he's my prime minister or president. Seriously. I mean, on the one hand, I'm not happy with my own country's leadership, but Trudeau is just such a buffoon. Did you ever see him answering questions in Parliament? He just keeps repeating his same lines about, oh, my government did this and that, and I can't believe that the opposition is focusing on something trivial or trying to strawman me. And then he's asked the next question, and he literally repeats the same thing word for word. Just he isn't even a good, like, he's a talking suit, an empty suit for hire, a talking head. But he's not even good at his job. I guess women like him because of how he looks or something. I don't know. I am honestly not too cognizant of why people keep voting for that guy. I guess things need to get much worse before people understand just how badly they erred in supporting that guy. Or perhaps it's because he has ultimate control of the media. In Canada, the newspapers are essentially state-controlled and funded, a lot of them. And that was something that he enacted as the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Hopefully, with Trump in the White House soon, we're going to have more freedom on social media, freedom of speech specifically, and if Canadians can actually get access to information and opinions that the government deems harmful, but harmful to whom, I ask, maybe they will come to the conclusion that the government might not be that trustworthy after all, if it's not too late by then. Thanks for watching, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.